Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining, all five of you, because I don't do chats. So, whoever's watching, thank you. And this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a subject matter that's multi layered with what we saw within the last 24 hours and versus my thoughts of the presentation of it and various other items. And it's also going to contain the subject matter of Scientology deaths and how the whole process occurs from, the first gens that are enduring it versus us second gens who are having to witness it and what we've witnessed so far. Naturally, the subject matter of death is going to bring along my Manson and Dahmer trolls. So, hello, Manson and Dahmer trolls. We're talking about death today. So, thank you all for being here too. So I don't know where to begin. People need to realize that there's Mike Rinder, the subject matter, and then there's what he did yesterday and the format of it and what it represents. And to the people out there that are freaking out, like, oh my God, how can you be talking about a man that's on his deathbed? And you are the same people that made fun of, like, Miriam Francis, Liz Ferris, other people with various health ailments, and you guys were scrutinizing the piss out of their personal health decisions and every move they made. So guess what? It's your turn. Now you get to see what it's like on the double side of things when people scrutinize someone that you people really like that's having a tough time with their health, and the public's going to ask what's really going on and what's happening. So you folks maybe take this as a lesson on humanity, and that generally it's a pretty trash paw thing to do, but we're doing identically what you guys did. So you have to deal with it. It's the way it goes. It's what comes up must come down, and I'm a firm believer in that. So, what, my God, it's just so tough. What I saw yesterday was probably the most bizarre, creepiest shit I've ever seen since I've been into a Scientology building over 22 years ago. I mean, it brought back a weird place in my life where, watching his video, I sort of felt like I was right across from, like, an ethics officer just drilling into me and talking to me about what a failure I am. And, I don't need to explain it, but I've seen enough David Miscavige videos and Scientology videos from being internally in growing up in Scientology from the time of my birth through the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. Every time there would be an IAS event or a David Miscavige event or an L. Ron Hubbard event, I've seen every one of them because they all would get live streamed to all of the smaller orgs via, like, TV satellite. Sounds weird even saying that today. TV satellite. But when you walk into the ethics officer's room and it's just like this big desk, or even, my sister, how she was the executive director, and they have, like, just the biggest desks in the place. And there is a very Scientology type thing with L. Ron Hubbard where he's always at just this gigantic wooden desk. And it's just him, like, I don't know if they're trying to make it look presidential or whatever, but it's something, if you notice over the years, there's always been that thing. So the presentation I saw yesterday, I watched him with his big desk and his grandiose position, like he's in, the next COB, or he's still like a Sea Org ethics officer. I sensed that. I mean, his whole video yesterday had Scientology written all over it. And what I can say is that, and I've been saying this about this whole crew for over 15 years now, you're dealing with a bunch of lifelong adherents of L. Ron Hubbard. All of them. And this is the end product of what you get. And I've seen it happen numerous, numerous times. There was straight verbiage in that last video where he's essentially saying he's still using Scientology technology to help him figure out his things that he's doing. But the way it was worded, it was trying to sound like it's not talking about Scientology, but we all know he was talking about Scientology, which is fine because you can do whatever you want when you're having your passing days. This is the part that's fucked up, though, is leading people on for many years that you're at, like, fighting Scientology when you really were just fighting to keep L. Ron Hubbard's beliefs alive. And when I remember Mike Rinder, if, you know, something, eventually nature's going to take its course and that day's going to come regardless of what we believe in. I don't, my memory and legacy of him is he's going to be the man that saved the independent Scientology movement so that they all were able to, because Mike Rinder left, like, the Sea Org and all of that stuff happened with him, and it's a long story. And you guys ask, how do you know this stuff, for the brand newbies watching this? I have to tell you, I was born and raised in Scientology. My mother was a devout Hubbardite for over 30 years, and when she was declared, she spent 15 years being an independent Scientologist from like 2006 to probably 2018, is my guess. So yeah, I know a little thing or two about witnessing everything. For those of you that are like, oh my God, she always thinks she knows everything. I don't know everything. I don't know jack shit about what it's like to be in Sea Org. And I've said that a few times in my videos because I wasn't allowed to join because I tried LSD at 15 years old. But I did join staff once at 7 for my summer vacation and once again at 19, and that was like a 6-month long one, and oh, that was the worst. But I don't know. Something that you all need to know, okay, about Mike Rinder's presentation is, it, to me, it just read like, wow, he's a Scientologist giving his final farewell speech, and this is how it's done. I mean, I've seen this. We've all seen this happen many times before. So I don't know. I guess it was a little triggering seeing the format of the video. And you know, I didn't watch all 6 parts. I watched maybe 2. And I did see the one where he basically gave Aaron a public ethics handling. Aaron, that's gonna get to be your Mike Rinder legacy. Is he actually mentioned your name and gave you a public ethics handling before, you know, going on to whatever happens next. I don't know, but so I saw that part, and I'm sorry for my sardonic humor about all of this, but this isn't my first rodeo with experiencing Scientology deaths, how cold, how callous, and kind of how weird they can be, and even how more weird they are going to be once what we saw yesterday, once that time expires. Oh my God. I'm going to probably take a break from YouTube for 1 month when that happens, because I went through this with Arnie Lerma. That was bad. Went through it with Doug. I'm still dealing with it. I still have 2 crazy lunatics trying to fight me about how they really were Doug's best friend and not me, even though they just popped up last year and I've known Doug for 12 years. But these fanatically obsessed trolls are still fighting with me about Doug's friendship. So thank God I really don't know Mike Rinder, because we already have 3 people waiting. As soon as that time is up, these 3 people are going to be, and then there's going to be like 12 other people on top of them that join in the fun and say, no, they were really Mike Rinder's best friends. And or some might even say they were his secret lovers. This is for everyone in the anti-Scientology community, like protesters, ex-Scientologists, independents. You guys know what I'm saying is true. Like, madness is about to break out when this time ends. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to witness with my own eyes that much lunacy and weirdness of, I can't even describe it. But so, he was doing his thing and basically giving Aaron a Publix ethics handling, and everything I noticed was focused on what he did bad, that he was out 2D. That was the whole ethics handling against Aaron, is Mike Rinder saying, Aaron, we just couldn't handle your out 2D stuff. And that was very chilling, because when my time comes and I'm going to have to publicly face my kids, or, have my final words of what I've been through, my final words are not going to be telling people how they fucked up in life and what a piece of shit they are, which is kind of what Mike Rinder did. A large part of his speech was just attacking people and saying what useless piece of shits everyone is against him. But I'm noticing this, of course I'm dealing with my own parents that are in their early 70s, and they spent 30 plus years in Scientology. And there's this course you have to take in regular college called, I think it's developmental psychology. It's one of the courses that Chris Shelton never took to obtain his master's in psychology degree, which is like a foundational college course, developmental psych. Chris Shelton has not taken that class, but he has a master's degree in psychology. Sorry about that. So when I did this developmental psychology thing, they talk about, my God, it's been so many years. You guys forget, like, I'm getting old. I'm 46, so I did all of this stuff from 22 to like probably 28 years old. All of my figuring myself out and weird, going to raves and other things on top of that, probably 22 to 28. I'm 46, so I'm pretty boring these days. So this whole thing with Mike Rinder, talking about what happened, it's just interesting. I think someone's at my door. Hang on a second. I'll be right back. You never know when you make these videos. There's always people that listen in at your door to see what you're doing, and that's always fun. But yeah, I don't have a big YouTube channel on purpose. I don't want one. I don't want to be a big YouTuber. So I guess my point is, every person that I've ever met that has spent like a lot of time in Scientology, they do this thing, and it has to do with that developmental psych course I was talking about, where they get into integrity versus despair. What is it called? It's Erickson's, it's not hierarchy of needs, Erickson's stage of development. So the very last one is integrity versus despair. And that's when you're at the last stage of your life. I think Marilyn may have been trying to discuss this on her show, but that's where you look at your life and you're kind of in the final part of your life. And they don't teach us any of this in Scientology. We have no steps. I've said this before, like it's a system where you're taught how to live, but you're not taught how to die. So when these people are faced with that reality that, they're going to die, they don't know how to deal with it. And it's actually watching a lifelong Scientologist have to face that. It's much harder than watching somebody that grew up in Christianity or another belief system where they do have that. They do have those aspects in their belief system where they teach you how to be towards the end, the whole in phase of your life. You could sit there and read passages and verses while it's your final days to help you feel better about yourself. Buddhism has their Tibetan Book of the Dead, and those items don't exist in Scientology. Although we are told to read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and we read it and we have no idea what it means. So I actually ended up reading it in its original, how it's meant to be read as an actual Buddhist, because I started attending this Tibetan Buddha place, and one of the teachers there, Geshes, whatever you want to call them, he kind of gave me the inside scoop about that. So yeah, it's a belief system that teaches you how to live and not how to die. And you also have to remember people that spent all of these decades in Scientology probably have only visited a doctor once in their life during a 50-year time span. And I'm not saying that to be funny or facetious. It's genuinely true. I talked about how my Scientology home birth and how I only went to a doctor one time throughout my whole 9 months of pregnancy. Well, Scientologists, the older ones, when it comes to their health, they will go to the doctor, like they'll spend decades, because in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they think they're invincible and life is great. But then when they start hitting their 60s and 70s and they still have never been to the doctor, a lot of them are sort of like train wrecks with their health. Like they already have cancer, diabetes, heart failure, liver issues, pancreas issues, things that they have had going on for 15 years that they would have known about 15 years prior if they just went to a doctor one time. But now that they waited 40 years, they go to the doctor and the doctor is like, oh, you have stage 3 cancer, you have diabetes, you have congestive heart failure, you have COPD. That's how it goes with a lot of our lifelong parents. That's what happened with one of mine, and I witnessed it occurring. And I remember when he, like, it's just tough to talk about, but I'll never forget, like, my father getting that diagnosis of, you have diabetes, you have heart failure, and you have COPD. And he came home and told all of us. And as a second gen, that's like a tough pill to swallow, especially when I've never been taught about anything in relation to these subject matters. I thought it meant that my dad's gonna die like in a week. And I remember I think I was probably 30, it's about 15 years ago. I was about 30 years old when I found this out. And I remember crying so much that, like, it was so weird, but I cried so hard because I couldn't, it was almost like believing, like, wow, my dad's really not a mortal being. Like, he has diabetes, congestive heart failure, and COPD. Like, this isn't supposed to be happening to him because he's a clear, past life clear. So it's tough because those diseases are like, they're very long processed medical situations to go through. If you have a relative that has congestive heart failure, it's not a fun time. It's not a picnic having to deal with it. I've seen my father almost die twice. I would say in the last 4 years, I've had to call 911 on him twice because he stops breathing. And after the second time, it was like a huge eye opener to me of like, eventually, eventually, this is going to be it for good. You know what I mean? Eventually, I'm going to call 911 on him, and he's never coming back. So I had to come to that realization like 5 years ago. And I've seen on my niece and my surviving nephew, on their side of the family, on the dad's side, many of them were heavy duty Scientologists, and their father died during COVID. It had nothing to do with COVID though. And he was somebody who dedicated his entire life to Scientology, and he was not exactly a nice person. I remember as a child and a teenager watching him abuse my niece and nephews, like physically and mentally torment them on purpose. I don't know if this is like a trend with Scientology parents, but some of our parents can be pretty sadistic, where they get a kick out of like bull baiting their kids on purpose, like calling them stupid over and over again to see what they'll do and things like that. So Scientology mental abuse it's a different type of abuse, but it's pretty intense. I think that's why the trolls have a hard time dealing with me, because you guys are dealing with someone that has had their brain zapped with so much Scientology desensitization techniques from the time I was 6 years old that I'm just not going to care what you idiotic trolls do or say. I don't know when you guys are going to understand that about me. I genuinely don't care. Like, I'm incapable of caring or feeling shameful or guilty of anything. And thank L. Ron Hubbard for that. So I keep getting off track here, but I do. I have to deal with my father, and I have to deal with my mother. Both of them, none of them believe in mental illness to this day. They don't think that they need to get mental health treatment. And my mom is an angry person, nonstop, extremely angry, very angry to the point that it's not healthy. And I'm noticing this with older Scientologists, that they're kind of ending off very spiteful and angry and full of hate. If I was, sorry for the noise in the background, if I was Mike Rinder, what I would have done on my video, I would have said, hey, Aaron, I'm on limited time here. Whatever things that happened between us, let bygones be bygones, and I wish you the best of luck, and peace be with you and your family. That's what I would have said if I was in Mike Rinder's situation. I would not have given Aaron an ethics handling on live TV about how out 2D Aaron is. So I just think for us second gens, it's not a surprise. That's why you guys in the other communities making videos, what Mike Rinder is doing, we're used to this. We're used to getting the shaft by these dudes. They've never given a fuck about second gens from day one. So it's not surprising to us that people like Rinder and the Headleys are not caring about us now. I mean, yeah, we were kind of hoping of like, hey, can you guys give some sort of confirmation that this is not okay? We were at least hoping for a sign of life from one of them, to at least, even Mark or Claire or whoever, for one of them to say, tell their audience, you guys, please stop picking on the second gens. It's not okay. That would have been nice. Just for you first gen folks, it would have been nice for us to know that you all even have a pulse and are capable of doing something like that. But it's not surprising that people like the Headleys and the Rinders don't have a pulse or a conscience, and they still are refusing to do that. That's how they are, and that's what Scientology does to people. So, if anything, what I would say is look at what's going on with our situation of, the video exhibition yesterday that occurred, and just look at that as that's what happens when you spend your whole entire life in Scientology and only caring about yourself and not going to a doctor for 40 years, then finding out that you have, you know, probably 5 serious health conditions going on at once and terminal conditions. And, and you waited beyond that and you still got auditing and you still used Scientology therapy trying to help you. And then that didn't work. And then now you have to realize the untimely death of all of us. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I see with this situation. It's not fun to look at. It's never fun to look at somebody that isn't going to be around forever. I remember seeing my aunt who died of lung cancer, non-Scientology related. This was like 15 years ago. And I remember having to go to her funeral, and it was open casket, and watching her, probably all 75 pounds of her when she normally would weigh like 140 pounds. It wasn't easy seeing someone like that. And what I will say about Scientologists is they don't do like open casket funerals. It's very rare that you hear about that. They tend to go the cremation route, like one and done. Let's get her done, like Larry the Cable Guy. I'm not kidding. Like, they actually have a dark humor about death in Scientology of like how long is this shit gonna go on? When are you gonna just drop your body and call it a day? That's the mindset in Scientology about death. It's really, it's very cold-hearted now that I think about it. And I've witnessed it when my 9-year-old nephew died, and my sister had to get a lot of auditing intensives, and I remember her during the funeral crying her eyes out because her 9-year-old son just died, and these like Sea Org or Scientology members from LA telling my sister to stop crying, and they were just like, you're being banky, knock it off, like stop crying. And it's like, her son just died, but you're not allowed to you're not allowed to like openly grieve after a Scientology death, especially if it's like a Scientology funeral, which my nephew's was. You're allowed to like shed a couple of tears, but sobbing like oh my god, my baby's gone, and crying, you are prohibited from doing that at Scientology funerals, or you will have OSA or whatever other staff members are in attendance, you will have them shutting your ass up really quickly to stop crying. So that's another thing that needs to be understood. Don't expect us to be like this doom and gloom and over dramatic crying bunch when that time happens. We're not. I mean, you're talking about a guy that spent 30 years doing some things that, if he had exposed them, actually could have brought down the Church of Scientology. But, I think it was intentional, and it was not done so that L. Ron Hubbard's works could still remain around. I think what he did was helping the independent Scientology movement out. It was not helping the anti-Scientology movement one bit. And you also have to remember he was the second choice to be on the Aftermath show, wasn't he? He was not even the first choice. Leah had another one picked over Mike Rinder. And you guys know who that person is, right? So, you people that are sad about this thing with Mike Rinder, would you be sad if the other person was around? And it leads me to believe you guys are only sad because you only care about your favorite TV star and which one you think is hot amongst us ex-Scientologists. That's all you guys think. Um, so yeah, death is, it's a hard thing to process, and it's a hard thing. I think that if he kind of came out and about every 3 months and showed us, so we could at least see it as like a gradual process and not wait literally till he's about to transition into whatever happens when that transition occurs. If he made a video before us seeing him like that, that would have been nice. But I think a lot of that has to do with probably shock value, you know, so that we'll all be like, oh my God. And then it could be rubbed in our face of how terrible we are for saying bad things about him. I do notice with older Scientologists, including my parents, they tend to do this. They do this whole like, I'm so old and weak now, and why are you doing it? Like, it's almost like they regress into little children and they act very infantile, like we have to feel sorry for them. Now, I don't know if that's what happens to everyone's parents, but I do notice that it's a Scientology thing of, you know, like, how could you do this to me? Look at me. Look at me, and you're treating me this way. Um, I don't think that's necessarily Scientology. I think that that's just they don't know how to process healthily the natural process of death and dying because it was never taught to them. Um, and it's something that they have to understand instead of sitting around being extremely depressed and beating themselves up about it. And it does. It makes me depressed, makes me sad seeing them because I know they're not happy inside. They're not happy inside. Um, they'd be a lot happier if they could just free their minds, but they're not going to. And that's just a sad, tough reality that we have to face with all of our parents that are going through this and seeing what we're seeing on TV. So I guess that's all I have to say for now. I could have gotten in more depth, but it's a tough subject matter to tackle without either encouraging people or spooking people off. So that's all I have to say. All right. Thanks, guys.